So clearly there's loads of work at the moment for any of you like me who are working with employers on remuneration issues. The job retention scheme, obviously, between a quarter and a half of employers have got some or all of their staff on that scheme. And although it's called the job retention scheme, most of us know it as the furlough scheme. So that's really a lot to do with pay, and we're obviously involved in all the details. What do you do if people are off sick when they're furloughed? What do you do if people are on maternity? Loads of different things to work out, and it's pretty well specified. I think we've got to admit the government have done a good job, but details emerging daily pretty much in terms of how it's being applied. So that's there. Then for those of us who've got pay reviews, most of the surveys I think showing that the majority are being deferred at the moment if they're due in April, which is the biggest month, of course, for pay reviews, at least in the private sector, they're being deferred. A few being cancelled, but most people, I think, adopting a kind of wait and see. And similarly with annual bonuses, I think you're seeing caution there. I'll talk about exec pay in a minute, but caution really in terms of what the impact might be. Decisions on executive pay, we've seen quite a lot of temporary and voluntary cuts being taken by executives, averaging about 20-25%, so akin to the guaranteed pay through the furlough scheme. And also for any of you've got pensioners in DB schemes, and indeed employer contribution schemes anyway, there's a whole question about can we afford those in the current climate? What are we going to do if we can't? So you could easily get a video conference every day on those issues, but I guess I wanted to have a look a bit further ahead, and you might take the view that a friend, as he put it to me on LinkedIn this morning, you're not planning ahead for the future because you're focusing too much on the crisis. Stop it. This is the single biggest challenge to face employers since the Second World War. Of course, we're going to focus on it. We can pick up the big strategic stuff when we begin to see a bit of light at the end of the tunnel. So that's one viewpoint. You might think we don't need to take account of this now. But I guess the thing is that decisions that you're taking now in employers are really going to affect that future. Who wants to work for you? What existing employees think of you and how you're reacting to this crisis. And so someone like Morrison's, just reading one of the analyst reports there, appears to have had a good crisis, responded impressively business-wise, and they immediately guaranteed the pay for their staff. Obviously, their business has been booming, so they've been able to recruit new staff, put in place very quickly staff protection measures, awarding a bonus just over £1,000 for all staff, and also doing lots around food banks and supporting charities. So definitely, I think from a reputation or an HR sense, they're having a good crisis, and there's plenty of other examples. But one of the HR magazine talked about separating the saint from the sinners, and I was reading the FT yesterday about supposedly the happiest place on earth. There with that particular company suspending 100,000 cast members at its theme parks. Unemployment benefits are as low as $275 in Florida, where the big original park is. And although executives have given up the remainder of their salary for the year, pretty big total cash payments and protected incentive schemes, and the chief executive's package worth more than 900 times the median of the Disney workers' earnings. And I guess, some of the wonderful shows of solidarity we're seeing, and care and health worker contributions is really maybe leading us to question some of those differentials. And the IFS has done an interesting review on the effects of the crisis so far, and basically it says it's exacerbating the effects of a lot of the trends that took hold after the last 2008-9 austerity period, recession and following austerity period, that the people suffering worse now are those in low pay, fragile employment practices, gig working. They're the ones who have got a very high proportion of their costs getting spent on housing, public transport, childcare. All of those costs have been shooting up over the last decade when their pay hasn't, and so they've been experiencing real pay cuts, and now they're the people most likely to be in the worst affected sectors by both economically affected and also those areas that are most at risk from the virus itself. And women, particularly 2/3 of low-paid workers are women. And so I guess, I'm not sure if you noticed, but the government suspended the gender pay reporting requirements, which seemed to me a pretty unnecessary and unhelpful step, given that it was only a week to go and over half of the 10,000 employers covered had already uploaded their gender pay gaps data for this year. So I guess the question is, do we want to go back to a situation that we had for the decade after the last recession of growth in low paid work, 5 million workers earning less than a real living wage, growth in 0 hours contracts workers, and we know work insecurity is associated with poor mental health, and growth in self-employment, growth in numbers but not in income, with lots of low-paid self-employed workers really contributing to that halving of self-employed incomes. But for those at the top, differentials for FTSE 100 chief executives increasing significantly in a situation of growing poverty, weak benefits, and as I said, minority groups and women, BAMEs suffering disproportionately really over that period. So is that what we want to go through again once this crisis is over and hopefully we're progressing through to economic recovery, but with a huge government deficit? Or do we want to do something different? And I guess I'll circulate the paper I've put together on what that different future might look like for remuneration. For government, I'm encouraging them to really strengthen voluntary frameworks that some of you are probably a part of, like the London Mayor's Good Work Standard, and really maybe require suppliers to the public sector to be signed up to those charters and accredited against them. I think compulsory reporting should be extended to a much wider basket of human capital and ESG metrics. The Good Work agenda already underway, but I'd like to see it go further, get rid of the worker status, which I think is just a confusion between employment and self-employment. Rather than just giving employees the right to request a stable contract, I think they should have the right to one after a certain period. Much better enforced, much better enforcement through the proposed single body, and much more meaningful employee involvement and support, as well as I've written more about paying care workers properly and reinstating public sector pay progression. But about, for the employers on the call, what should you be doing? Well, the priority areas I see really are pushing fair pay harder. I think trying to get all employees back within a common job evaluation and pay structure framework. Seeing the value of pay progression, so that's a benefit and an investment rather than a cost. Far more adoption of the living wage and extended progression for employees through your pay and career structure. And at the top, executive pay reform, so that we're not having these huge differentials driven by very weakly performance-related incentive plans, but really a much simpler model of a reasonable base pay, an annual bonus, and a simple grant of restricted stock. All employees really getting the chance to share in the financial benefits of the success of the employer. So encouragement as well, possibly from government, we'd like to see for profit sharing, and even more encouragement for all employee share plans, rather than individual performance related pay, and really remembering what benefits packages are about, which is security and support rather than glitz. Hopefully the risk-sharing collective defined contribution schemes will soon be legal, and so we'll see more companies adopting those. We've seen great work during the crisis on mental health and financial well-being, and beyond just having an EAP line that you passively leave your employees to call. And again, I think that will have had a big fill up. So I think, the question is, which way do you want it to go after this crisis? Do you want a repeat of austerity and the sorts of measures that you put in place then? Or, as Peter, the chief executive of CIPD, put it, should we be breaking the old paradigms and questioning how fair they are? And Katie at People Management really said, let's not waste this crisis. Let's use it to create the future of work we want to see. And I'd ask you, what future do you want to see, remuneration employment-wise, and what are you going to do from next week onwards to bring it about? And then hopefully you now agree with my friend Adian, who says, this isn't binary. We've got to manage the immediate difficult issues, but at the same time recognise and use our influence to shape people management strategy and policy and practice for the future. So I hope those comments will help you to do that. Elizabeth, back to you.